The following program was recorded on May 7th, 2014. The event is a special guest speaker telephone conference between guest speakers Justin Meise, a principal partner in a communication and marketing firm based in White Plains, New York, Ed Offley, an experienced journalist and book author, and students in COMG 503 Media Relations, which is one of the required courses in Marist College's Masters in Communication program. But let me just kick things off by welcoming everybody. I appreciate, in particular, our guest speakers who are giving up their private time, their personal time with family to be with us, and thank also our, what do we call it, the coordination committee, Caitlin, Camelia, Marcia, for volunteering to help put this together. And special thanks to all of the volunteers, students who joined us tonight. This is an optional event, but I appreciate your interest. And I think you'll find that this is one of the more valuable parts of the course. I like to tell this story. I spent quite a few years as a PR practitioner, but kind of retired from that, went into teaching. And when we have people like Justin and Ed in the classroom, students say, gee, we get to hear from a real PR expert or a real journalist. So you guys are real, you're current, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. But thanks, students, for joining us. I want to let everybody know that I'm recording. I want to turn this into a podcast, share it with you and others that might have missed this later. We'll put it out, Ed and Justin, on our social media outlets at Marist for other students and Marist community members that want to listen to it. So with that, I'll let Cam and Caitlin introduce our guests. Who wants to go first? And that's Caitlin. Caitlin, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Van Dyke. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Justin Meise. Justin is a principal at River Communications, which is a firm that is based in White Plains. Justin actually is a Marist alum. He graduated with a BA in English Lit from Marist, and then got his MA in Liberal Studies from Fordham. He says that he fell into communications. He actually began his career as an English teacher and was working on an educational software package when realized that, it might be beneficial to be making a little bit more than you need to get the rent. So one of his friends asked if he helped with his PR firm, and the rest is history. He currently works mostly in the financial sector, and he says that while it may not be the sexiest sector to promote, there are distinct advantages to working in a technical field. Your fundamental skills of communication will stay the same no matter what industry, but some technical fields tend to be a little bit more lucrative. You become quickly skilled when you have to learn a hard industry, and there's lots of opportunities for growth and development. On a personal note, Justin's hobby is flying. He's been involved in the Civil Air Patrol and some pilots associations in New York. He enjoys speaking, so tries to get into classrooms, workshops, conferences. And he says that you need to be careful what you say, especially in the digital age, as it will come back to haunt you, as Dr. Van Dyke likes to roll out a ghost story that Justin admitted to seeing a ghost as a freshman in college, and it comes back each and every time he does a speaking event. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kim.
So I had the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Ed Offley, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity in introducing him to our class today. Mr. Offley comes to us with a wide array of knowledge in writing and journalism. Mr. Offley's latest published book today is titled The Burning Shore, How Hitler's U-Boats Brought World War II to America. In a recent review of his book, it highlighted what happened during the desperate months, largely through the stories of two men, the commander of German U-boats that made 4 voyages to raid U.S. waters, and the pilot of the U.S. Army Air Force bomber that eventually sank the former vessel. It is clear to me that Mr. Offley's military background and phenomenal military journalism is one to be reckoned with. Mr. Offley has some interesting viewpoints that I feel are valuable as we pursue our careers after graduation. When asked, how do you feel about citizen journalism and the impact of blogs and social media, he replied, it's only as good as its own knowledge. He also advised that when it comes to social media, times have truly changed. One interesting point that relates to our professor is that Mr. Offley suggestions on what could be discussed. Mr. Offley's pointers to our class, or the old Hemingway cliche, find out what you're interested in and stick to that. He also stated to find your own subject area and be sure you have placed value and effort on your own self-education. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Ed Offley to our class.
Well, thank you both, Caitlin and Cam, and let me just turn the floor over to our guests. I guess we'll reverse the order and start with Ed. If you have any brief remarks or comments you want to open with, now's a good time to share those. And then, Justin, if you could follow Ed.
This is Ed. I hope the line is not dead.
No, we can hear you.
I'm still here.
I'm still here.
No, I'm still here. We can hear you. So go ahead, Ed. If you just any short remarks you want to make, and then after that, Justin.
I just want to say it's a real pleasure. This is the kind of maybe new old media or old new media that I'm still learning how to participate in. I'm very glad to have a chance to interact with so many fine people, and I'm hoping we have a very positive discussion tonight. I grew up in the era where you sat in a classroom and the teacher pointed at you and talked for 60 minutes and you went to the next one. So this is kind of fun. The one thing I'd like to sort of just say in passing is that I had the perspective of a military reporter over a 30-year period, but I have to say in all candor, for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been working happily, gloriously, full-time as a book author. And the advantages of that to daily deadlines, you can easily imagine. My commute is walking downstairs to my basement. My editor is my dear wife, who is an English teacher, and she's a perfect editor for anyone who wants to write because she doesn't believe a thing I write. I have to prove it to her. So once I get past Karen, when it gets to the publisher, it's just all downhill from there. But one of the things that obviously I thoroughly enjoy is what you can do in a book that you can't do in a newspaper article, even online, is you can get into depth and nuance of a subject that the space restrictions just in journalism would create impossibilities. So I think of myself as having the best of both worlds. I'm still somewhat familiar with the military, although I've lost track of anyone I know in the command chain. They're all 10 years younger than me now. But it's so interesting to be able to take subjects that at one point were journalistic and to turn them into history. It's the latest chapter in my Earth's career.
Well, thank you, Ed, and Justin, over to you.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Mark. I echo what you're saying, Ed. It's really fun to get a chance to kind of trade ideas, particularly from my point of view. I think between Ed and Mark, I'm a bit of the odd man out. I'm not military, and I'm one of those awful for-profit people. So I think I have a little different perspective on some things, and I think we'll have some fun getting into that. Sort of this distinction or the differences between working as journalist and working as PR practitioner. Although I think, and Mark, I know you agree, Ed, I would imagine you agree. I think to be effective as a PR practitioner, you have to really understand what the journalist's job is, and you really, to rise successfully in the field, I think you really need to, at least have the skill set of a journalist, if not master it, even if that's not what your role is every day. Because again, if as communicators, what we're trying to do, regardless of the subject matter, is convey information in a compelling and interesting way, so that primarily journalists in this discussion will find it interesting and be engaged by whatever it is you're trying to communicate. You have to really understand what it is the journalist is looking for, and what their role is, and what their job is. And I think there's a good lesson in that anyway, which is, even if it's not a journalist, and I'm sure, Mark, you've hammered this into many students over the years, whenever you put pen to paper, whenever you start thinking about something you're going to say to communicate, it always begins with the audience. And I think we'll get a little deeper into that in a few minutes, but that's a little bit of my perspective on the discussion.
Well, thank you very much. And I couldn't agree with more of what both of you said, and we would like to get into that deeper. So I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Marcia, and she's going to open it up to Q&A.
Hi, everyone. I just want to please keep your phones on mute in order to eliminate any background noise. When I call your name, you can unmute your phone and ask only one question at this time. This will ensure that everyone gets a turn. If we have additional time at the end of the session, we'll address any follow-up questions you may have. Also, please remember to mute your phone after you ask your question. And in order to head into the Q&A, we're going to ask Lauren to kick off the session. Lauren, are you still online? Go ahead and ask your question, please.
I'm still here. My question is for Justin. I was a PR major at Marist, so public relations is something that I'm really interested in. And I know that you've been in the field for a while now, so you're bound to run into probably crisis here and there or potential negative situations. Can you just talk a little bit about how you would go about dealing with a potential negative situation from start to finish? Like, what's your typical game plan?
Yeah, sure. You know what? Maybe a fun way for me to answer that question, Lauren, is let me give you a real-life scenario that happened to me over and over again over a period of 7 years for one client that was a significant hedge fund. And they had a complicated investor dispute, which I won't take the time to explain now. But one of the things you run into in the crisis situations, and it took us a while to get the management of the firm to really understand and grasp, was that if you're going to effectively handle a crisis, you need to have a plan in place before the crisis happens, and you need to have buy-in from the stakeholders, and you need to have a management team that you have a connection with, that you have a direct line to the decision makers, so you can get clear information, make decisions on what can be shared or not shared, how you're going to respond, and so forth. So let me explain why. When you get into litigation situations, and somebody sues you or sues your company, what will happen is they will send the complaint, as it's called, that they're filing, say, in the Southern District of New York. They will, at the same time, send it to Bloomberg and Dow Jones and Reuters and, the trade publications and everybody else. So, the story I've told many times is 9 a.m. the day after Christmas one year, my email, my BlackBerry, and my phone starts, lighting up, because somebody sued my client, and they purposely did it when they knew the management team would be caught off guard. My CEO was out of the country up skiing at Whistler, because when you're a hedge fund manager, that's what you do. You fly your jet up there. The general counsel was in Europe. Another one of the partners was in Florida, and, it's just chaotic. So, what we ended up doing was instituting with them, hey, listen, we need to be able to respond less than 2 hours, because the wires are not going to wait. Because they'll get that complaint from the plaintiff, and they're calling us, and they've seen it, and our lawyers hadn't even seen it yet. So, what we had to do was create some holding statements that, I needed to have a green light on from management and from internal, external counsel, knowing that when we get into litigation, here is sort of a playbook of things that I can say and know that I can always say this, and be comfortable and safe, and within all the guidelines and everything that the company laid out with us, so that we can respond. Because you don't want to not respond if you can avoid it. So that's kind of step one. Have a plan, have a response plan, have some holding statements you can use. And I think another part of it is you need to spend a fair amount of time. This is another really tough one for the financial industry, particularly for hedge funds. Because of the nature of how they operate in a little bit of secrecy for competitive reasons. They don't want, one hedge fund doesn't want the other hedge fund to know the kinds of activities they're doing, because they can, for gamesmanship reasons. But, I think one of the challenges is that building relationships with the media that is most likely to cover you, and that's a tough one. But it's really important, and I did a panel last year for an industry event with the publisher of Pensions and Investments, which is a major trade publication for the industry, and, they agreed. They said, yeah, you guys out there operating in this sort of clouded space, we need to know who you are so you're credible when something like this happens, and you tell us something. At least if we've met you before, if we know your background, we don't immediately assume you're Bernie Madoff. We can assume that you're legitimate guys, and we can get balance to it. So, long answer. I mean, that's a topic I could spend an hour on. Why don't I cut it there unless there's any follow-up questions?
Thanks, Justin. You pretty much just summed up some of the key points we learned about in this course through our reading. So it's nice to see what we learned put into perspective in a real-life situation.
Well, that's great to hear. I'll just make this comment to give a compliment to Mark, too, because keying off something he said at the beginning, where I know that Mark's students often say, hey, good, you got Justin and Ed here, guys that are actually doing this, but the irony is, Mark's the guy I go to for additional expertise and an education because of his experience.
Hey, Mark, Ed here. I've got to throw something in. Over the years, I've encountered a number of emergency and crisis situations in my relationship with the military as a reporter. And I've got to tell you, the most successful example of what a military PAO could do that still to this day dazzles me is this is ancient history. This is like back in 1981-82. The aircraft carrier Coral Sea had just come out of a $150 million overhaul in Virginia, completely rebuilt, modernized. The captain took the carrier down to the Caribbean for some training workups, and after a day and a half collided with a freighter, completely crunched in the nose bow of the ship. This guy I knew, who was a lieutenant commander, who was a spokesman for the Naval Air Forces in the Atlantic, heard about it on the message traffic. He immediately called up the carrier, ordered the carrier to launch a helicopter with a videographer on board. Actually, it may have been film, 16mm film for all you know. Circled the ship, took 15 minutes of B-roll of this bummed-up aircraft carrier, ordered the photo lab to make 3 or 4 copies of it, ordered the COD plane, the carrier delivery plane, to fly the film to the closest airport, and it had this stuff FedExed overnight to all 3 networks. Next morning, he's sitting in his office, and this 3-star admiral came storming in with a baseball bat about to kill him. This guy's name was Dale Smith. He's still one of my heroes. And he said, sir, you may take my head off that baseball bat, but on one condition. If this story is still in the news 24 hours from now, you may have my head. By preempting the speculation, the rumor-mongering, the what-ifing, he lanced the boil overnight. They showed 5 seconds on each network, and that was it. You never run away from a crisis.
Well, and I think it gets back to what Justin said, Ed. You have to know the role of the reporter. You have to know what the reporter is going to need. So Dale Smith knew what the reporters would need. He obtained that information, access to it, and provided it, which diffused the crisis. So it gets back to knowing each other's role and being prepared. So thanks for those. Mark?
If I could add one quick comment onto that, too. It's a great story, Ed. There's another quick lesson for the students in there as well, which is there are going to be plenty of crises. You're not going to be able to, spin in any kind of way that's positive. And you have to recognize the difference between something that's a crisis that is manufactured and kind of phony and you can deal with it versus something that, sometimes the people you are serving do dumb things, do bad things, do negligent things, and you have to address it. I think what Mark's talking about and what you're saying is, take the crisis head on, address it, and be real and genuine on it. And that's part of the way you get respect from the journalists, too. And I think that's what I'm hearing from you, Ed, so much respect you have for the actions that were taken there by Dale. And I think there's a great lesson in that whole story, absolutely.
Follow up on that, about 15 years later, we had a terrific tragedy out in the West Coast. I was working in Seattle. They had 2 A-6E intruders. This is the primary bomber on the aircraft carrier. And they were based up at a naval air station north of Seattle. And it lost 2 airplanes in a 10-day period. And the first time, it was just a 6-inch story in the news. But when the second plane went down, as I told my editor, that's when the radio talk show hosts all freaked out. And I had only fragmentary information, but I called this guy I knew at the Naval Air Station, the operations officer, and I said, what can you tell me about this latest crash? He says, nothing. We're in total lockdown. Come back on Monday. This is like Friday. And I said, Star, I can't come back 3 days from now. I've got to do something today. And he says, I'm sorry, I can't help you. And this is back in the good old days. My company actually paid for a helicopter. And chartered a helicopter, and they flew a photographer and me to and we found the crash site down in the mountains south of Chehalis, Washington. So we had our daily story. And I told this guy later, I said, I understand that you're bound by regulations and procedures, and you've got investigations to launch, and there's a lot of stuff you can't tell us. But you cannot just close the gate and say, go away. We cannot go away any more than you can. And it had a happy ending. Apparently I hold the Navy's record for flunking the aviation physiology swim test, which you have to take to qualify to ride in one of these carrier bombers. I drowned 4 times before they finally passed me. And about 2 weeks later, everybody's nerves are still bruised. And there was still, some controversy over whether or not the airplane was unsafe or there was a flaw, whatever. And I was sitting in my office and the phone rang, and it was a public affairs officer at the base. And I said, well, what are you up to now? And we talked about the situation for a while. The radio talk shows were still hysterical. And I said, you really need to do something to get ahead of this story. And she said, okay, we'll think about it. And she called me back an hour later and said, the Admiral would like you to fly on that same low-level training route. It was like 50 feet over the ground in the mountains on radar. She said, we'd like you to fly that route with one of our pilots. And I gulped and swallowed my stomach back down into my bodily cavity. And I told her, I said, that's the best comeback I've ever heard from the United States ever. And I flew the route.
Well, again, I think the important point there is you need access, and PR practitioners need to find ways to provide journalists access to the story. Otherwise, the journalist will find another source, maybe not as favorable as you would like, to find that information. So let me, with that, turn it over to Marcia again.
Hi, Carlos, you're up next. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please. Carlos?
Yes.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was thinking about the many times the fact that when Mark was mentioning earlier before the conversation the embargo, and how many times during their careers or your career you have been exposed or been in the dilemma of releasing certain information at a certain time, having that ethics and that criteria. Could you share with us some of those moments when the ethics make the releasing of information critical?
Ed, I'll take that one first if you like.
Okay, I wasn't garbled. I'm not exactly sure what he asked. Did you ask crazy?
You're just asking about if we have encountered situations in our careers where when information is embargoed or it can't be shared, or the plan is not to share it. I'm kind of paraphrasing a bit, Carlos, but if it's not going to be shared with all audiences equally at the same time, it's sort of an ethical and moral dilemma there. Have we confronted it? I would. So I'll jump in at first and then start us off. I would say, there's a couple scenarios that are common for me, but back to Caitlin's introduction where I work. I'm in a highly regulated industry, so financial information has to be distributed to all audiences basically simultaneously, and that in itself is kind of a fascinating discussion about whether or not you actually can achieve that. So we don't typically get in the kinds of situations that I think Mark and Ed have gotten into. What we do run into, though, is, on things where we're launching something, and this is more on what I would call product PR, where a client is launching a product or a service, or you're launching a new company, business, brand, anything like that. Or there might be release of some research or data that you have, and it doesn't carry with it the implications of, Ed's example of, a Navy plane going down, or even trading or a shareholder perspective. But what we're trying to do is maximize coverage. We want things to, we always have to play this game. We just did it with a big launch of a study that we worked on for Russell Indexes about a type of investment strategy that's referred to as smart beta. I won't bore everybody with all that is. But in any case, we have this choice of, well, do we go to one reporter and try to get an exclusive, or do we distribute it at the same time to a lot of people? And we kind of did a hybrid of that. We went to a few top-tier reporters we thought might be interested. Again, in terms of respecting them and the relationship, we went in sequence. We told each what we were doing and what the timing was, gave it to them on a Friday to see, just to give them first shot, because this was top tier. We were trying to see if we can get one big feature out of Financial Times or Wall Street Journal. So we'll do some of those kinds of things. If you're giving an exclusive to somebody, then, it's a little shady if you don't hear back and you move right on to somebody else. So I think, again, good relationship, good open communication is key there to develop trust. So I think that's part of it. We have done things where we will embargo information, and I think trust goes into that as well. Embargoing is not as common in my end of the business, as it would be for the types of things that Mark and Ed were talking about. So we always kind of cringe. That's why I was joking about the PR firm gets fired, because, at the end of the day, you can't really control anybody. And I think, and maybe a topic we'll get into a little later, I'd love your Ed's perspective on it later, is, how competitive the media's gotten and this race to get information up on, all platforms, and, I've argued that there's been a push over the last decade to be first rather than be accurate, and that's always a challenge too. Why don't we save that for later? I don't want to get us on a big tangent there, but I do think it's an interesting topic. So, Ed, you take it from there.
Yeah, well, one of the I guess unpleasant realities of working in my particular field was that, and maybe every journalist would say this, there are two things I used to say. One is that there is a large silver engraved tray somewhere in the Pentagon, and it says, "The New York Times, please deposit your leaks here." And the other one is that there's no self-respecting journalist who ever thinks about writing his memoirs that doesn't have a chapter that starts, "Screw the New York Times." There is a hierarchy, obviously, in both print and broadcast journalism, and maybe even now in online. And if you want bang for the buck, it's better to be on the front page of the New York Times than on the front page of the Oakland Tribune. And if you're a reporter of the Oakland Tribune, you just have to learn to live with that. But I found in the long run, the military, ostensibly was a very large, very bureaucratic, and yet very human organization. There was a lot of hostility towards the news media in the 70s and 80s that I personally think was misdirected, but that's just me. And so you would have to struggle to establish credibility. And one of the things that I found was that over the long run, as word got around that I knew a colonel from a corporal and I knew how to spell the right name of the commanding generals, that bolstered enough credibility in the eyes of the military that when I dealt with people, they would deal back with me. And there was a huge feedback loop that just recently was formally terminated. It was called the Pentagon Early Bird. It was a system where they had a daily newsletter of every major national security article that had been published, New York Times to the Dubuque Bugle. And if you got your story published in that meant that the 6,000 senior people in the Pentagon were reading it with their breakfast cereal. And that did wonders for having people return your phone calls. So it's a matter of, I just call it, I guess, a pragmatic thing. When you're giving out information as a public relations person or as a military PAO, you don't want that information to get lost in the white noise. You want it to have an impact. And so it's sort of up to the journalist and the PR person to make sure that their own little operating system is working to that effect.
Thanks, Ed. If I could just add a couple of things on there. Carlos, my advice would be always remember as the communicator, you need to be fair and unbiased and ethical. You can't get into a game where you play favorites, giving somebody an exclusive one day and somebody else an exclusive the next day. It's going to come back to bite you. You also have to know who you're working with. You have to be able to trust people like Ed Offley. And Ed and I, in our time working as the journalist public affairs officer duo, developed a trust and respect for each other. I knew I could trust Ed with information. If I don't know the reporter, I'm not going to trust that person. So it takes a while to develop that skill and that sense of ethics of what, I mean, the moral compass should always point north, but the ability to determine who you can trust and who you can't, that takes time. But always be fair and unbiased when you represent your client. So, Marcia, back to you.
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to ask Kenyatta if she has any questions. She can join us now and ask her question.
Hi, I'm here. Thanks, Marcia. And thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. This is a great chat here. I had a couple of questions, but we're only going to ask one, so I'll ask my one question here. I was curious as to your thoughts about the rise of the blogosphere in the last 5-10 years. Do you think this has a positive or negative impact on the credibility of the news industry in general? And I would love to hear from both of you, from both perspectives on the blogosphere.
I'm sorry, who did you ask that for?
It's both of us, Ed. Do you want to kick it off, or would you like me to start?
Let me do it first because I'll be really brief. Sure, when it comes to social media, I tell people that my peak of technological prowess was probably the toaster oven. I've been trying to learn social media in the promotion of my new book, and whether I'm succeeding or not is still too early to tell. I would just say that the blogosphere is like democracy run rampant. Good luck to anyone who tries to deal with it. Things get out, they get out fast, but boy, there's a lot of hinky stuff that gets out. So I have nothing to offer except be very careful.
Well, and when I heard you asking the question, I was wondering, Mark, if this was a plan, because Mark and I have argued about the blogosphere for 10 years.
Yeah, when I first met Justin, I asked if he had a Facebook, business page and blogs, and he said, no, we don't get into that stuff. The financial industry, they're too nervous about it. Well, within a couple of years, Ed comes into my classes and he's teaching us about how to blog and do Facebook pages, etc. So it's a learning curve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, financial industry is coming along with it. It's still very conservative, again, because it's highly regulated. So there's kind of three elements to this question, really. So one, just taking it head on, blogosphere in general. As a guy that runs a PR agency, I mean, you can't ignore that, hey, this is great fodder for making money, because we write blogs for multiple clients, all kinds of different information. Usually it's sort of like consumer education, personal financial management education, things like that is mostly what we write. But I guess you can hear I'm conflicted on it, because I personally cannot stand social media, and I'm right there with you with the quality of the content that's out there, and it just infuriates me when, like, CNN will put on an expert talking head, and their designation will be blogger, as if that qualifies them to be anything, in my opinion, because they're not working with a major organization. And even though I'm happy to pick on the New York Times as my colleagues are, but at least with the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or another established publication, you can have some comfort that they're following some level of journalistic standards and integrity. And that just doesn't happen in the blogosphere. So as a consumer of the blogosphere, I think it's a complete farce and a joke. However, not all of it is. You have to be selective. I think that's one of your points, Ed. And so, that's what I'm kind of conflicted on. I think the quality of content you have to be very suspicious of. So certainly Ed and I agree on that. But you can't deny it. It's an irresistible force that is plowing forward. I mean, so much of what we have to measure now includes page views and eyeballs on websites, eyeballs on blogs, and all other kinds of things. How many tweets and so forth did came out of a news event, and how many people retweeted and all that kind of stuff. I know that gets into the whole measurement question, but the blogosphere, and if we throw social media just broadly into the blogosphere, I think as PR practitioners, especially just inferring what I think, what generation I think most of the students on the call are, if not all, this is the future for you guys. So, yeah, I don't think, I think it behooves all of you to really master all the nuances of how the blogosphere works, how social media works, what the interplay is, and those kinds of things.
Well, and Ed, I know you're familiar with editorial meetings for a newspaper. It used to be years ago, you'd sit down with all the editors and senior journalists and you'd decide what was going to run on the front page and elsewhere. The media would set the agenda. Now, I know from hearing about the editorial meetings, one of the first questions the editor is going to ask is what's trending on social media. And that's going to lead the news. So PR people, you have to get inside the decision cycles and know what the media are following, which means you got to follow the social media. And I'll put one out there for you. I read a lot of newspapers and websites, and I just came across something today that I think is going to trend big, and it's the Italian version of The Voice. There's this fantastic singer who got 4 chairs to turn around, and she's a singing nun. Sister Christina. I will bet, because of the way it's trending on YouTube and other social media, if you have not already heard of Sister Christina, you will soon. So we'll just put that aside and think about it. Okay, Marcia, back to you.
Caitlin, we're going to ask you to ask your question at this point.
Hello, thanks. So I would like to know if, in either of your opinions, you both have kind of very different perspectives, so whomever would like to take this, that'd be great, do you think there's a difference between marketing and communications and PR? Are those 3 different things? Are they all one and the same, or how do you see that?
Yeah, I'll jump on this one first. This one's very much in the sweet spot for me, actually. I think the way I'd answer that, Caitlin, is it gets into how we talk about the communications process with clients. And for us, it's all about content and then what I call distribution or engagement. So what I mean by that is, I guess it really comes into what I'm sure Mark talks a lot about too. It's the whole integrated communications approach. We kind of look at audiences. We develop messages, make sure they align with whatever. In our case, it's all business stuff. So whatever the business goals are, and then we try to develop content that can help carry our message to all those audiences effectively. And then from there, we look at all different tactics. So we may create a piece. So I was mentioning something we're in the middle of working on right now for Russell Indexes, which is this whole topic of smart beta. So we work with them to develop a survey. And once the survey is produced, we work with their analysts and we develop what that content is. And we help shape and package it, figure out how to message it. Now, we're going to use that content in all kinds of ways. So there's a press release that goes out about it. There's a media tour and editorial meetings with reporters around it. It's turned into a white paper that's shared with clients. It's tweeted out there. I just wrote Mark, you'll love this. I just wrote a blog article for the that's going to be bylined by the CEO for the Russell blog. Right?
Way to go, Justin.
So, see, I know. Despite my best efforts to stop you stem the tide, you can only shovel so much sand, right? But no, but in any case, that's how we would look at it, Caitlin, is it's all one blurry mess, in my opinion, right now. So I look at, public relations to me has almost become just sort of a tactic or a channel. Marketing, what's marketing? Is it the website? Is that social media? Is it direct? Is it direct marketing? Is it events? Is it apps? All those things. And we play in all those spaces. So from our point of view, it starts with the message. It's your audience message, content, and then it's packaging the content and adapting it for all the different formats, how you might use it to carry that message. So that's kind of sort of in a nutshell how we view the world.
Christina, I'd like to throw in one thing. What I know of public relations, marketing, and communications as opposed to journalism is that, A, all the bright students apparently are going into marketing, communications, and public relations, and B, that's where the money is. And, oh, by the way, Mark, Sister Christina was on page 1 of the New York Times this morning, so they're fast too.
See, what the New York Times is following what's trending.
I'm looking at the picture of her belting out the song.
Okay. Marcia.
Yes, I'm here. Camelia, you can go ahead and ask your question now.
Hi, Marcia. This is Kim Yetta. Camelia just texted me. She had something urgent to come up, and she had to step off the call.
Okay.
Okay, no problem. That's fine. Actually, I can go ahead and ask my question.
Yeah, go ahead, Marcia.
My question is for Justine. I just want to know, how do you benchmark the success for your public relations campaign for individual clients?
Well, my common quip in answering that is we measure it by whether or not they want to keep paying us. And, I'm kind of kidding, but mostly I'm not. That's what it comes down to. The question is, I'll take it in two sides. Let me finish answering kind of the business side of this, but then I'll get into the academic side, which I think is, probably most valuable. Maybe not. I have seen from an agency perspective work that was, average, not bad, but average. But an agency person sells that work in so well that the client can't believe how amazing it is. And a budget gets increased. That is a huge win as an agency, somebody running a business. But getting to the kind of the meat of the question from an academic standpoint, we've really seen measurement evolve a lot too, and I was alluding to that in my social media answer because, between things like Radiant Sticks and, Cision and some of these other, measurement tools that are out there that we use, it's pretty sophisticated, more so than, for most people on the call, you probably don't even think in these terms, but pre-internet days or even early internet days, all this measurement was done manually, literally taking the scissors and cutting articles out of the newspaper and making books of them every day. That was a big part of it. But, obviously the modern version, I'll give you two examples. The work that we've been doing for Citibank the last 2 years, we do in partnership with Fleischman Hillard. I'm sure most of you know who Fleischman Hillard is, one of the largest PR firms in the world. We have a partnership with them to do the work for Citibank because we had greater expertise. They had global offices, more arms and legs. That was kind of a good match for Citibank. But in any case, we had to dedicate on each account because Citi requires it, being Citigroup. I mean, they're a huge global corporation. So I would say typical budget for each business unit within Citi might be in the $20,000 a month to $25,000 a month range, and about $5,000 a month is spent just on measurement. And these are pretty sophisticated metrics and charts, all kinds of fancy stuff that comes out of it. But we're measuring, first off, number of articles, which we would just refer to as hits. They would measure on the social media front, tweets, how many times is a certain thing mentioned in different social media channels, things like that. All of it gets collected. And then it gets produced. For Russell Indexes, we do kind of a more manual process, and we just do that internally. And some of the account team, their job is to capture a lot of that same information, and every week it gets put out there. So, as far as benchmarking it, that's a little more elusive. I'm trying to think on the Russell Indexes case. I don't think they ever really looked too closely at, 1 year over the other year. I think it's really more on a kind of per what do you want to call it, news item or per launch basis. And, oftentimes things get measured in ways that are non-traditional. For example, we just did a big summit for them with a lot of media, and we got plenty of press coverage from it. But the number 2 guy in the business, what he was most excited about was the speakers that we chose included somebody somebody he wants to get as a client, and he got quality time with the client. So as far as he was concerned, that was the best thing they ever did. They'd never done one before. Now he wants to do them every week. So, there's like the traditional things you measure, and then there's these non-traditional things that keep you employed.
Thanks, Justin. Mark, you also had a question, didn't you?
Yeah, but I'm going to save that. And I want to flip it over to Ed because, from the PR perspective, we have certain ways to evaluate what we determine as successful outcomes in our job. Ed, I'm assuming, for a journalist, it would mean, let's say, print media. You increase circulation and make enough money to make your investors happy. Seriously, as you as a journalist, what do you consider to be a successful outcome in your profession?
When I hear about all these metrics and measurements and tweets and stuff, I feel like the poor scriptwriter who got summoned to Hollywood and was told by the producer that I want you to have this script 30% funnier by next Tuesday. What I did for a living and what I would hope is still being done by other reporters who write the news and cover events and try to figure out what's going on, you can't even really safely say, oh, my coverage made my newspapers better and stronger. I thought I did a pretty good job as an editorial writer at the Ledger store in Norfolk, and then I did a pretty good job as a military reporter in Seattle Post Intelligencer, and I have to tell you that most of those newspapers no longer exist. Our metrics were more subjective and more I don't know, even anecdotal. I saw it as my job to inform my readers as to what was going on in the United States military, both at home and abroad. And I would write stories, and they would print them, sometimes after long delays. And I just had to sort of say, well, that's what I do, and I'm hoping that I'm doing a little bit to keep the gap between the military and the civilian sectors in society from getting wider. I worked in a community where there was literally the military surrounded us and infused us in Washington State. We had the second highest number of nuclear weapons in the world stored within our state borders. We had 4 of the 6 largest counties. The largest employer was the military. And yet, most of the civilians I knew, and including most of the people who were editorial directors on my newspaper, could not tell you the difference between Beetle Bailey and Norman Schwarzkopf, mainly because of this historical trend that was an inadvertent response to the all-voluntary military. So I saw my job as not one of generating column inches or metrics or anything, but just telling a story. And hopefully my script was 3% funnier by Tuesday.
Well, and I appreciate that, Ed. And for the students, I would encourage you to develop a healthy respect for what people like Ed do. When I was in Bosnia with a NATO mission, I worked closely with one of the best journalists I ever knew, and that was Kurt Schork, who was the Reuters bureau chief in the Bosnia region. He would cover combat operations at great risk to his life and file stories with people back in the U.S. and abroad. And I asked him one time, he had reported a story from Sierra Leone. And I asked him, if it doesn't run, if the editors don't choose to run your story, how would you feel about all the work that you put into it? He said, Mark, my job is to shine the light into the darkest places on earth that no one else can see except for those of us that cover the news and report it. Once I report it and send that story off, I've done my job. I leave it up to the editors to get it out to the audience. And unfortunately, Kurt lost his life in Sierra Leone in an ambush, and he died doing the job that he loved the most, and a job that we benefit from. So I think that measure of success is, as you say, getting the word out to us. And Justin, let me close with I'll relate to the students a funny story. When Justin first came into my classes at Marist, I was teaching some basic undergraduate PR courses, including one on public relations case studies. And for that course, I used a book called Adventures in Public Relations, Case Studies in Critical Thinking Authors were David Guth and Charles Marsh. And I've got that book in my hand right now, Justin. I still keep it with me. And this is the ivory tower version of public relations. And we teach that the PR process is you do research, you take action to plan, you communicate, and you evaluate. And that's the RACE formula. And Justin would come in and tell my students, after he heard about what I was teaching, hey guys, forget about that Guth and Martian approach. Research and evaluation, too expensive, takes too much time. If you want to determine and evaluate the meaning of success, for me that means I want to earn an income and pay my staff. Do I get a contract renewed? Does my employer cut me a new check? Then I'm successful. And I leave that with you because much of what we teach you in this ivory tower, according to the textbooks, is great on paper. But as Ed said, even the best theories and knowledge are going to go down the drain on first contact with reality. So you have to develop the ability to synthesize what you learn at Marist and in our courses and apply that to the real world very carefully. So you got to know the difference between book learning and reality. So with that, we're at the end of our time. I want to give Ed and Justin just one more chance to close with some comments. Ed, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Mark. I found myself having to write down on a scrap of paper today just the answer to some of these very, very good questions. And like most questions, I found myself thinking maybe I should get a job at Hallmark greeting cards, because the things that kept coming back to me were just basic, not just to journalism or public relations or marketing, but to just human life. My success as a military reporter dealing with an institution that by and large was suspicious of people like me, I persevered through things like give and take, honesty, showing empathy for the other side of the story, even though the other side of the story was in a bad way. I found that human connections were a lot more important than degrees or credentials. Showing up was everything. I remember my first RIMPAC exercises. This is a huge naval exercise in the Pacific Fleet every 2 years. I showed up one year and I asked the public affairs guy, I said, well, where's everybody else? And he said, you're in. I had the entire Pacific Fleet to myself for a week. Meanwhile, there were 350 reporters covering the NBA Final Four. So that's where the priorities were back then and probably even now. So essentially it's this. Do what you love. Know what the hell you're doing. Study every day. Study your client. Study his product. Study this chaos out there that we call social media. I'll let you guys do it. I'm terrified of it. I still don't know what retweeting means, so forgive me. Sorry. But the basic is this, that we're interacting. You're trying to provide information, context, hopefully a winning argument. And you do it by knowing your subject and delivering whatever you deliver as honestly as you can. Herein is the sermon.
Thank you, Ed. Very true. Justin?
It's tough to follow, Ed. I agree with everything you said, and I won't repeat any of it. But definitely, you talk about relationships and those types of things. It's so important. A little different flavor on one of your points I'll just add is that, you got to bring some passion to whatever it is you're doing. And this is something, Mark, you often ask me to talk to your seniors at Marist.
Yeah.
As Jenny just did too, about, hey, you guys are graduating, so, how do we get a job? Or what do we do? And I think, everything Mark is teaching you, all the Guth and Marsh, despite my mocking of it at times, it's all quality stuff. And you need to know all that stuff for sure. But I think what an employer is looking for, what a client is looking for, what a journalist, if you're interacting, is looking for, they want to know that there's a real person there that you're advice I give people looking for jobs, entering the job market, trying to transition. It comes back to just some basic principles or basic qualities, I should say, not principles, that I think everybody just, wants, gravitates to. Be easy to work with. Be supportive of the people around you. Find reasons to be enthusiastic about them. Give them reasons to be enthusiastic about you, which is another way of kind of in some ways, following on what Ed said. But ultimately I sum it up with just be passionate about what you're doing, and be a voracious reader, because if you're going to understand journalists and you're going to become better writers, you have to read a lot to really get an ear for what quality writing is. And I think if you're going to be great as communications counselors, you need to approach whatever field you're doing communications in with the attitude of, I need to understand the business that I'm serving as well as the CEO does. Because some point, as you go up the ladder, you will need to write for the CEO, or you will need to advise the CEO or other members of the management team. And I think, in order to do that, you have to take a mindset of, I'm a communications practitioner, but I'm also an expert at the business, that I'm applying my communication skills. So I'll leave it there. Obviously, Mark knows I could go on for 2 hours, but I won't do that to everybody.
Justin, just one more point. If you could add on to that, some very, very good advice that I still have committed to memory, and that's explain your philosophy about hungry, humble, and smart.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted me to turn it into that, Mark. But yeah, I always talk about it. This is what I explained to everyone is what I'm looking for when I'm hiring people, and I believe this is what clients that hire us are looking for. But hungry, humble, and smart. I think I'm just going to make a guess here that most people on the call, most of the students are, roughly in the millennial generation. And the knock on your generation, those of you that are, and even some of the Gen Yers and Gen Xers, is a knock of entitlement, and you're not willing to pay your dues, and you don't have the work ethic, and there's lots of other things we can apply there. So I think, the hungry, humble, and smart thing is, we want to know that people have ambition. And again, that's another way of talking about the passion I was just describing. So that's the hungry side. The humble side gets at that entitlement issue. It's a hard thing to accept when you are graduating from college and your professors have patted you on the back and you've gotten great grades, or even in your graduate program like you're in now, that you're getting great grades or whatever, and a lot of praise. But the thing is, you don't actually know anywhere near as much as people that have been doing the job for 10 or 20 years. And you don't know enough about the businesses either. In fact, what I was saying about writing for a CEO, it takes a long time to gain the experience to write for a management level person. So you need to approach it with an attitude of, you know what, I definitely can learn. And the more I learn, the more I understand I don't really understand, sort of that Socratic wisdom thing. So I think that's the humble part. And smart. I mean, hey, back, I think Ed and Mark both said it. Read, study, be a student forever, whatever the industry is or the sectors are that you're working in, because every organization wants smart people who can think critically, be trusted to make sound decisions, and ultimately bring a lot of value, whether it's a for-profit enterprise like the industries I serve, or it serves a public policy or a public interest like the work primarily that Mark and Ed have done. Either way, just that's what they're looking for.
Well, thank you, Justin, and thank you, Ed. We're a little over time, and I promised that we'd be out of here at 9. So let me just wrap things up. First of all, to Marcia, to Camelia, to Caitlin, thank you very much for the work that you put in voluntarily and so well to put this together and talk to our speakers and coordinate the agenda and pull off some fine introductions. Thank you to all of you who joined us tonight. I appreciate you spending the time to be with us, and I hope you found it worthwhile. And most of all, thanks, Ed and Justin. I think you've captured extremely well the essence of that unique relationship between journalists, the media, and communicators, public relations, marketing, social media advertising. It's a complicated relationship, but it's one that needs to work well so that our publics can be informed. And especially thank you for the words of wisdom for those who are about to graduate with their master's degrees, and many of whom will seek jobs or seek advancement. I think the principles that you gave us, the keys to success, we should write down and have them on a pocket card. So again, thank you to everyone. Ed and Justin, I'll follow up with a message and maybe a phone call tomorrow. And again, very thankful for what you brought to our class tonight. Thanks to everyone.
You're quite welcome, Mark.
Great. Thanks, everybody. My pleasure. Enjoy doing this with everybody.
Okay, good night, everybody.